Bonsoir and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm your host, Nathan Staples, and joining me this week is Eric Devine, and we will have Brendan McFarlane joining us later on for some Ligue 2 chat. It's the final international break of the season, and Didier Deschamps has got one last good look before he selects a squad ahead of the European Championships. It's possibly the two biggest friendlies of the year for any of the players on the fringes of that squad. But who will make it and who will remain on the sofa this summer? We will discuss that and more after this week's news. France recorded an encouraging 3-2 win over young Netherlands side on Friday. Dimitri Payet marking his return to the international setup with a start on the left wing. Antoine Griezmann opened the scoring on 6 minutes with a free kick from just outside the area, while Olivier Giroud doubled the visitors' advantage 7 minutes later after a corner the Dutch failed to clear. France then had a host of chances at the half, and Netherlands made a host of changes. Apologies at the half, and the Netherlands responded in kind with Luc de Jong scoring a free kick just after the intermission. Ibrahim Afellay brought proceedings on to level terms with a goal from the edge of the area before Anthony Martial slipped in Blaise Matuidi for the winner. For the youth teams, the under-21s defeated Scotland to top their qualification group. Sébastien Haller on the score sheet twice in a 2-0 win at Angers, with the team in action against Macedonia at the time of recording. And that's all your news this week. Remember, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN for all your latest headlines. We start this week with the French national team, who will be back in action tomorrow night against Russia. But Friday saw Les Bleus pull off a solid 3-2 win against the Netherlands. Eric, they looked to be cruising in the first half, but they made it a little bit tough work to get over the line in the end, didn't they?
Yeah, I think the introduction of wholesale substitutions at the half may have had something to do with that. Deschamps just wanted to get a look at some of these players. I mean, pardon me, bringing on the likes of Lucas Digne and Kanté and Martial at the half. I think, it took a little bit to get settled for these players. I think that by and large, that was something that I think if you wanted to take away a negative for France as a team on the match, I think it would be a lack of chemistry and a lack of understanding. Particularly in that spell early in the second half when De Jong scored, but also somewhat disturbingly that both of those goals had come from set pieces. The team looked decent for the most part going forward, particularly in attack, but there was just a lack of cohesion in a lot of parts in the defensive midfield and in defense. Players just not really seem to be on the same wavelength. Again, this is a busy time of year for most of these players, given that most of them are chasing the title and in their various respective leagues or are still involved in the Champions League. But still, nevertheless, it would have been nice to see a little bit more focus overall from the team. But on the whole, yeah, I mean, the touch for Payet to slip in Martial there from Matuidi's winner was great. There's a lot of really encouraging signs on the whole for this team. I think that Deschamps, may be onto something with Payet, bringing Payet back into the fold, to say the least.
Yeah, I think the starting lineup they had against the Netherlands was a really interesting and strong one. I think you starting Dimitri Payet on the left, Griezmann on the right, in maybe a slightly more orthodox position of a sort of inside winger. And Giroud up front. I thought they combined really well. I think, personally, Antoine Griezmann had an excellent first half before being taken off. I thought he had a real dynamism to the attack that sometimes teams can lack, I think. And whenever he seems to get the ball, he's always looking forward, much like you want your forward players to do. And he scored an absolutely superb free kick. I don't think there's any denying how that was. But I thought he always looked dangerous when he was in possession of the ball. He always looked like he was on the brink of doing something interesting that would push the team forward. And I thought it was a really good piece, but you briefly mentioned it there that you thought Dimitri Payet had a really excellent game. Do you think he's really solidified his potential position in the squad?
I mean, let's see what happens tomorrow, but I think he should. I think that I think this is the thing that France have always functioned for me at their best when that front three is as fluid and as mobile as possible. And I don't know that that'll include Giroud in the long run, but for the time being, as you rightly mentioned, Griezmann likes to cut inside. So does Payet. Payet can drift deep and drift inside and almost act as a second striker. And which allows Matuidi to come up on the outside. The variety of positions that he can take up, I think, really mean that he can, regardless of his nominal position, his talent on the ball and his vision, I think, make him an absolutely integral part of this team. And I think that Deschamps would be, barring some injury or catastrophic downturn in form for West Ham, I think he not only needs to be in the 23 this summer, he needs to be a starter on the left-hand side of that front three, if that's the formation that Deschamps is going to persist with.
Yeah, I think to pick up on your point there, I think you mentioned about the potential fluidity of those front three, and I've mentioned before that I think it would be most interesting to have someone like even Anthony Martial starting instead of Giroud, and having an interesting three that can rotate, can move around those spaces. And Dimitri Payet adds to that. From even a wide position, you can play him centrally. Both would work because he's so good on the ball and picking up those little pockets of space. And there'll be always, if he does play almost as a false nine at times, he'll have players like Griezmann, like someone like Martial or Kingsley Coman that will want to go past him and give him the options that he needs in front of him to create those dangerous balls, whether it's from crosses or from through balls. But was there anyone who really disappointed in the game for you, Eric?
I think there were two players who perhaps stood out as being disappointing. I think that N'Golo Kante, I really think could have had a better game. I don't think that he looked just too nervous and didn't seem to have the right level of interaction with, in particular, Pogba and Matuidi, that I would have liked to have seen. I think he still got a decent chance at being selected for the 23, but I don't think that. I think he really cost himself a chance to potentially have started. Again, Lassana Diarra's had a fine season, but he's a little bit older. He struggled with injury. If Deschamps wants to succeed not only in this tournament but also build for the future, Kante wouldn't be the necessarily more attractive option there. But I don't think he really did enough to grab the bull by the horns, as it were, and say that place himself in a position above Diarra. The other person I think really disappointed. And again, this is a little bit of Leon Homerism, I do have to admit. But I think Christophe Jallet definitely could have had a better game. He and Pogba really did not seem to be on the same wavelength. He was hugging the touchline exclusively pretty much the whole match. And he and Pogba misplayed several passes to each other. And obviously Paul Pogba is going to be in the starting 11. And I think it was really important for Jallet to have nailed that chemistry with the Juventus player. And he just wasn't doing it on the evening for me. It looks like Sagna is going to get to start tomorrow evening. So it still remains to be seen which one of them will actually start come the tournament. Maybe Jallet continues not to feature for Lyon and the decisions being made for him. Again, Raphael has started the last two matches for Legon. But I think Jallet and Kante probably didn't do themselves a whole lot of service. The other two players who I wanted to mention in this category may come as somewhat of a surprise. I don't think they're in any jeopardy of losing their starting position, but just for me weren't really up to their very best, and that's the center back pairing. I think Raphael Varane and Laurent Koscielny, definitely, particularly on the two goals, their marking really wasn't that great. These are two players who both are sort of adept at using their pace to get out of trouble situations. But the fact is, if France are going to play this 4-3-3 with a player in front of them that's going to be a Diarra or a Kante, as it looks at this point in time, or maybe even Yohan Cabaye, the fact of the matter is that third midfield player, that deepest laying midfielder, is not going to offer them the level of protection that they're perhaps used to in their club situations. Arsenal playing a 4-2-3-1, and Varane, again, Real Madrid tend to have a little bit more of an open midfield as well, but he's not starting consistently for Real Madrid either. So I think they just need to be a little bit more careful in terms of their positioning, be a little bit more astute. Again, this is a Netherlands team that's not supremely talented. Both those goals came from set pieces, but the fact of the matter is the defenders just didn't really seem to be where they needed to be for a match that's not of any real great importance for them in particular. They're both all but automatic members of the squad. Maybe Sakho starts instead of one of them, but the fact of the matter is a little more professionalism and sharpness, I think, would have inspired me a little bit more confidence in terms of France's defense.
Yeah, you've got an excellent point there, Eric. I am a little bit cagily worried about the French defence. That's probably the weakest area of the pitch for them. I mean, choosing between Jallet and Sagna feels a little bit like choosing between odd pairs of socks. It's at the moment players that won't necessarily start for their clubs. Are they at this moment in time international fullbacks? I'm not so certain at that kind of level that France want to be at, which is winning the tournament, really. It's a real area of concern. I mean, I like both Koscielny and Varane. I probably prefer Varane, but they are, you mentioned it, they're very similar style defenders, and it's always difficult to decide whether two defenders that work in the same style can work together as a pairing. You maybe want someone more like you mentioned Sakho there, who's more of a attacker of the ball, tends to attack headers very well, and tends to be the one that engages first rather than covers his tracks. So maybe that might be an option that Deschamps tries on tomorrow against Russia. Maybe try a different centre-back pair and seeing if something else works maybe a little bit better. But you mentioned Conte's performance there, and I think you're right. The occasion might have been a little bit. Seemed a little bit eager. I think it might have been the better decision to start him, to sort of ease him into the game a little bit rather than bring him on. Although he might also want to have tested. That might be something again he tries on tomorrow night to try and start and Kante with Pogba and Matuidi and see how that works, because for moments in that second half, I thought the midfield worked really well in the sense of it was almost like that old style 4-4-2 where they could all decide when one could go forward or two could go forward and one would sit back, because they were all quite adept at doing all the jobs. I mean, I was quite impressed by the defensive work Pogba put in, especially in the first half, to help out the team. And it wasn't an enormous amount he needed to put in, but because the Netherlands threat wasn't really there in the first half especially. But I was impressed that he was willing to be in that more reserved role and allow Matuidi to go into that more advanced role he likes to play in. And I think that could be a more interesting midfield. I mean, I like Diarra as a player, and I think he obviously had a successful half. If I thought it was pretty anonymous, because that's exactly what you want from a defensive midfielder, really. But it's really interesting squad, and I think it was that's the question I want to come on to. It's these friendlies are difficult, really, for any team to bring on, especially when they've not played a competitive game for 2 years. Was this a good enough test for France?
Well, obviously, I think this is a Dutch side in transition. Arjen Robben and Wesley Sneijder are players who've had a fair bit of experience. Ibrahim Afellay, you can add to that as well. But by and large, these are young players who aren't that experienced, and they're playing a 5-3-2, which is probably not a formation you're going to see any team play in the tournament, at least not any of the contenders. I mean, Italy might play a 3-4-3, perhaps with the Juventus back line, but I don't really see them. They didn't really create much for me. Promes had his moments on a few occasions, and the set pieces were certainly key for them. But the Netherlands didn't seem to me to offer a true threat. I mean, let's be honest. These are a fine set of players, but are any of these players really top class? I look at the clubs they play for. I think that's their answer right there. Save Arjen Robben, I don't think there's anybody in the Dutch setup that I think can really be taught class as a world-class player anymore. This is certainly a very different team from the heyday of the likes of Van Persie and Schneider at his very best, going back 4 or 6 years ago. So, I think that the French FA, the FFF, have done well to schedule, teams that are generally considered to be in the top dozen or so in Europe. I mean, again, the Netherlands have struggled in recent times, but Russia are also a formidable opponent. They're not playing the likes of a Moldova or a Northern Ireland. I know Northern Ireland during the tournament, but teams that would be teams that are of a lower caliber. They're playing teams that are ambitious enough to want to be winning this tournament, to reaching the knockout stages of this tournament. So, they may at the time be a team in transition, but they're always going to have interesting tactical wrinkles. And yeah, I think they're a high enough quality. In terms of getting the players to focus, I would say yes. I think that the center back pairing aside, there was definitely an eagerness about this team to want to prove themselves. I mean, let's be honest. Matuidi and Pogba and Griezmann are all pretty much automatic starters. Hugo Lloris obviously was on the bench just to give Mandanda his turn at bat, as it will. But this team is starting to shape itself. But still, 3 months out from the tournament, we still have a fair amount of question marks surrounding the starting 11 on this team. And I think that those players who are playing in positions that are quote unquote in play, and be that Diarra, Jallet, Ibra, whether they had their best match is up to some debate. But I do think there was an eagerness there. And I don't think there was any sort of lack of motivation, even given the fact that this was the Netherlands, not perhaps at their best.
Yeah, it's difficult, especially when they've already played the likes of Germany and England in recent weeks, of more teams going to the tournament that are of top tier. It's difficult to schedule them again. But yeah, the Netherlands team at the moment you can see straight away when you look at the names, the amount that are playing for the likes of still at Ajax, or there's 2 that play for Southampton. That's not been offensive to these players, because some of them I've very much like David Klaassen. I think he might have a very promising career, but they're not of that ilk of the Dutch teams of the past, where you would go, that's a really interesting game that will give France a lot of experience. And like you say, especially with the defence being a little bit up in the air, a little bit more, it maybe needed a better test. But we'll move on to about the squad for the Euro 2016 Championships. Obviously, this will probably be our last podcast before the tournament, or at least the last international break. So it's only right to look forward to then. So let's start with those certainties. You mentioned a few already there that are certain to go in, the likes of Griezmann, Matuidi, Pogba, Lloris. Is there any others that are absolute guarantees to be on that plane?
I think the center back pairing, I think, are certainties as well. I think that Jallet and Sagna are both going, bar some immense resurrection from Mathieu Debuchy at Bordeaux, which I don't see happening. I think those are the 2 right backs with a degree of certainty. Left back, Evra is certainly going as the starter. Luca Dean looks set to be his backup. Although Layvin Kurzawa could say something about that in the coming weeks, although I think Kurzawa, a talented player, but his attitude, the recent bust up with Ibrahimovic and the issue with the under-21 playoffs a couple of years ago, just isn't showing the level of maturity needed. That's not an issue of talent. That's somewhat disappointing. Other players that I would consider a lock, I think that Martial, it has to be considered a lock as well. But yeah, other than that, I think that's probably about it. The rest of these players there's a lot that are pretty much there. I'm thinking in the likes of Moussa Sissoko, Andre Pierre Gignac, but there's still enough of these teams' seasons that things could change. I mean, okay, what if Lacazette scores nine goals in Lyon's last 7 matches? Is Gignac going to get picked over him playing in the Mexican League? Again, no slight to the Mexican League, but I think you'd be hard pressed to not consider France the 5th or 6th best league in the world, whereas the Liga MX is probably a step below that. Central defense, Jeremy Mathieu is picked this time around. for I'm not sure what reason. His versatility might be something. He can play at left back and center back when called upon. But there's a chance that a different defender can take his place. Perhaps the likes of Samuel Ntiti or Loic Perrin's been in squads before, but it's never been capped. So there's still quite a bit of flexibility throughout the bottom 7 or 8 places around this team, if you will. Yohan Cabaye in particular is an interesting one who's got quite a few caps, but didn't feature and may tomorrow, but used to be an all but automatic starter. But given his recent form at Crystal Palace, I think maybe playing himself, if not out of the 23, certainly out of the starting lineup.
Yeah, looking at the squad really at the moment, especially for the ones that were called up for the friendlies, I think the goalkeepers are practically a lock. I can't imagine Costil, but maybe is a maybe. But
Areola, Ruppier,
yeah, it's one of those 3, isn't it? Really.
Time.
No, it's not going to be anyone else other than that. And even if it is, none of them are going to see the field in front of Lloris or Mandanda really at this moment in time. So it's a mute point really. But defenders, like you say, I can't see anyone other than Jalil Sanya going at right back, even though that's a disappointment to say that there doesn't really seem to be anyone in the quality behind them. Left back, I think Dean played quite a good, decent game. I don't think he did anything horrible in the 45-minute cameo he's done. He's had an okay season at Roma as well. And then, like you mentioned, it's a real shame that Kazawa's attitude seems to be holding him back from what really looked like he was going to be a magnificent player at Monaco. And then ever since that weird celebration against Sweden, it seems to have gone a bit odd-shaped. I mean, Maxwell's still getting in the PSG squad ahead of him, and that's... Although I think he's a fine player, Kazawa's talent level and potential talent level should see him really succeed him. And he might do next season, but that's a season too late for someone wanting to go to the Euros, really. There's undoubted players like Matuidi and Pogba we've mentioned would definitely be in. I think Payet's definitely in now. I can't imagine, unless a collapse and like you say, a rubbish collapse, I can't imagine him. But I believe there's probably some spaces in behind them. Eric, do you think if Yohan Cabaye and Moussa Sissoko, if they do make the squad, do you think that would be warranted on their form this season? Because that will be the question, won't it?
So Sissoko has looked better since Benitez's arrival. In those 2 matches, I think he's shown a lot more drive and ambition, particularly the loss to Leicester. I thought he was really. I actually watched that match. It was on after we recorded, and I thought I was pretty impressed by him in that match, having not watched much of Newcastle the 3rd or 4th time I'd seen them this season. I think also, like Payet, there is versatility to his game. He can play on either wing. He could do a job as a striker, I suppose, given his size. So there's something to be said for that. He's also, much like Matuidi, one of these players who just kind of has an endless energy and has done a lot for the squad in the past. So I think Sissoko still deserves it. Cabaye, honestly, I would rather not see him go. I don't think he's done enough at Crystal Palace. I would rather see a true defensive midfielder take his place, whether that's Gilles Vosgy at Wolfsburg, Gonalon at Lyon, Jeffrey Kondogbia at Inter has been part of squads in the past and can do that role as well. I mean, maybe even Jeremy Toulalan. I mean, he's obviously 32. He's not the youngest anymore, but he's still putting in great performances against for Monaco rather. I mean, he was magnificent in the match against PSG last weekend. I didn't get a chance to talk about that with y'all last week. I was absent, but I think I would rather have over Cabaye in the 23 a no-nonsense defensive midfielder. I know Diarra and Kante are wonderful at breaking up play and starting counterattacks, but just because of their propensity to get forward and get into tackles, I don't feel that they necessarily protect a back four quite as well as a truly defensive midfielder would. And I think that spot should be taken up by someone who gives them that much more of an option. I know Cabaye can act as a deep line playmaker. He's and has done quite well in that role for France in the past, but uh, I don't believe he should be getting a place in this team, especially given his age. He's 30, 31, not exactly a young player, and will I'd be exceptionally surprised where he continue to be included when World Cup qualifiers start come the fall. So I'd rather see a younger, more athletic option being used as an option for the deepest line of the midfield three.
Yeah, you mentioned some interesting players there, like Kondogbia, Gololong, Gilavogi. I think Morgan Schneiderlin can be considered in that role as well. He's had a decent season, but mentioning, yeah, well,
I think your bias is showing there, Nathan. I think he's actually had a really poor season.
in the second, I would agree that he's slowed down in form. He had a good start to the season, but he's a more interesting option than Cabaye. But what I was going to mention was you mentioned Moussa Sissoko's versatility, especially in forward positions, and I'm looking at Hatem Ben Arfa, and I'm thinking that even as a punt is a more exciting, interesting option. That he's been such a brilliant talent this season. I mean, he scored another last week that was. It's very rare nowadays to see players that are so willing to dribble and take on players that I don't understand why you don't try and take a risk on someone like Hatem Ben Arfa, who can be a match winner at that kind of level. It's why so many clubs have taken a chance. And I mean, he's had a fantastic season. He's been integral to Nice. They've improved in the last couple of weeks, and lo and behold, that's because Hatem Ben Arfa's back fit. Do you not think he might be an interesting option instead of someone like Moussa Sissoko?
It's a tough one. It is a tough one. I think that if you're going to drop anybody to include Ben Arfa, it would probably be Kingsley Coman. And I think that Coman, given the form he's shown at Bayern Munich, both of them are essentially right-sided players. Given the form that Coman's shown for Bayern Munich and his youth and the fact that he could be an important player for this team for the next decade, I prefer to leave Ben Arfa out. At the present juncture, I agree with your case, but the present juncture, with him having just come back from injury, there is an element of doubt, an element of risk, and maybe Nice being in the position that they were sort of indicated to Deschamps, hey, let's just let him recover a little bit more. We're trying to chase the Champions League here. I do think Ben Arfa will be certainly a part of the 30 come the two friendlies against Cameroon, and I'm blanking on the other one, in May and June. And whether he makes the actual 23, I think that spot certainly is up for grabs. But if it comes down to two of the three of Sissoko, Ben Arfa, and Coman at present, I would have to agree with Deschamps' choices.
I think when you make the point about Coman, especially, if it became between those two, I think Coman doing what he's doing at Bayern Munich and the form he's shown this season, I have to agree, he's a very talented player, and he's a more natural wide player as well. So, and while I like Hatem Ben Arfa's dribbling abilities, but maybe not as big of a crosser of the ball, especially if they are playing someone like Olivier Giroud or a Gignac or possibly even Benzema if he comes back into the game in that position. But just very quickly, I'll throw a bit of an interesting one at you. I know he's back in training now. Nabil Fekir, if he has a very good end to the season, has he got a slimmest chances because of his talent level of getting in?
As much as I'd like to see it, he'd have to show that he was 100% back to full fitness. And there's 7 matches left in the Liga season. He may be included in the squad this weekend for Lyon, but in the squad, not the starting 11. I just really can't see it happening. It's a shame because I think he really is one of the most tremendous young talents France has seen in a while, and I think that he can really be a key part of France being perhaps even one of the favorites for the World Cup come 2018. If they're not already, the prospect of him playing with Griezmann, Payet, Martial, and Coman in an attacking group is just really tremendous. But at this point in time, unfortunately, not. As much as I really would like to see it, both as a supporter of Lyon and French football in general.
It's a frightening thought to think of Coman one wing, Nabil Fekir in a role, or maybe on another wing, Antoine Griezmann, Martial. It'll strike the fear in many opponents, but unfortunately, that might be a dream too far for this for these European Championships. We'll move slightly to the left now, as we are joined by our League 2 expert Brendan McFarlane to chat about the current season as it hits the final few weeks. Welcome to the show, Brendan. You can hear me? Just a second. Hello, Brendan.
Hello.
Oh, excellent. I've got you through now. So, it's been a very intriguing campaign and a lot of interesting results. But Brendan, in terms of promotion at this moment in time, it looks like it's going to be Dijon and Nancy, followed by one other club, doesn't it?
Nathan, it looks like Brendan's having some problems with his microphone. Brendan,
I'll see if I can get it to work. Sorry about that. Brendan, can you hear me? Go ahead.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Go ahead. Sorry. Carry. So it looks like it'll be Dijon, Nancy, and one more, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's definitely almost like a polar opposite season to what we've seen in Ligue 1. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well, we've got quite a close title race at the top between Dijon and Nancy. There's only 2 points in it, and I think both teams have shown this season that they're capable of losing matches. So that one looks like it could go to the wire. But if you look further down the table, from third place down to, in my opinion, 8th place, you've got teams that are capable of winning that third spot. So I mean, it's going to be an interesting final few weeks. But at the moment, I think there's a lot of teams that they're showing that they've got staying power. Because there's a lot of teams like Lens, Auxerre, Clermont that you'd have thought would have pulled off a bit, but they're still in the mix.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting season, especially for that third spot that seems to keep throwing up names. I mean, Red Star have been there for a moment, Le Havre, Metz, Lens, Clermont. Who do you think at the end of the day, with about 7 games left, who do you think is favourites for that spot? There's only 5 points separating the third from 6th.
At the moment, I would definitely say that Red Star are where they deserve to be in that third position. Whether they can hold on to that, I think, greatly depends on whether they can keep their main 3 players. That's Bouazza, Slaty, and Makinju fit for the duration of what's left of the season. Le Havre, I think, have got a very strong squad, but what seems to be the problem for me with them is that they do concede. Technically, I think they've got a great back four and they have a decent enough goalkeeper. But whether it's communication problems or it's just getting used to the style of play that Bob Bradley's brought in, I don't know what, but they do seem to slip up. If you look at the amount of goals that they've conceded, on paper they've only conceded 31 goals. That's not too bad. But if you look further down the table at teams like AC Ajaccio and Tours, they've actually conceded less. So conceding goals does seem to be a problem for them. That could work in Red Star's favour. Also, you can't discount Metz. They're still a great side. In terms of the standard of play that they play in Ligue 2, they've still got a sort of Ligue 1 mentality about them. And they don't believe that they should be in Ligue 2. They see themselves as a Ligue 1 club. So I would say at the moment my money would be on Red Star to get third place, but I would still say that Le Havre and Metz have a good chance. I think below that, I think it's too early for Lens to come back up. I mean, their main striker, Simon Benza, he's a good prospect, but in the 14 games he's played this season, he's not netted once. That's not to take anything away from what he contributes to the team, but he's not, in my opinion, out-and-out goal scorer. If you look at Clermont, it's the opposite. They can score. They've got a fantastic front line. Boulaya, who plays number 10 for them, in my opinion, is one of the standout players of the season. But it's at the back. They're conceding all the time. So it's going to be interesting. But I think it always seems to be the case with Ligue 2. You just can't predict what's going to happen.
And then when they do come up, it can be any one of those 3 that end up staying.
Exactly.
Just very quickly on the top of the table, Dijon and Nancy, like you say, there's only 2 points separating those 2. Who do you think will outlast the other for the championship?
It's really interesting because if you look at Dijon and Nancy, they're the two teams that last season everybody thought was going to come up, and then they just crumbled about Christmas time. Personally, I think Dijon are a great side. I really like Dalloglio, the manager, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the future you see him moving on to a bigger side in Ligue 1 because he's very regimented. He gets his teams playing good football, and above all, his teams are always fit. They're always in good physical condition. They personally, at the moment, my money would be on Dijon, but you can't discount Nancy because Nancy have got such a strong squad. If you look at the start of the season, Remy Walter, who's obviously playing for Nice now, he wasn't getting in the team because of how strong that midfield is. You've got Ait Benacer, who, in my opinion, is the standout player in League 2. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him playing in the Premier League one day because he just is that exceptional football player. But aside from that, they do seem to slip up now and again. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or whatever. They do have a strong enough team to win the league. They should be in Ligue 1. They should have gone up last season. Rea, I think, is a coach who demands a lot out of his team, but I think sometimes he perhaps demands too much. He maybe puts too much pressure on his side. But also in terms of Nancy's own pitch, they play on an AstroTurf pitch. That creates problems for teams coming to Nancy, but I also don't think that they play the type of football that they'd want to play on that pitch because it does create difficulty for their own players.
And for teams going down, and it's currently 7 points, apologies, that are separating 19th from 13th place Stade Lavallois. Who do you think will go down to from Ligue 2?
It's been a really tragic season, in my opinion, for Paris FC because I mean they came up at the same time as Red Star. The Red Star's rivalry. They really shouldn't be in the position they're in my opinion. They've played so well at times, but they've slipped up so often through their own doing, and that's why they're rooted to the bottom of the table. So I think it's a foregone conclusion they will go down. But when you look at that 19th place up to, like you said, 13th place, there's a lot of teams who are going to be involved in this fight right to the end. Personally, I don't see Créteil staying up. I think they're one of these sides that for the past few seasons in Ligue 2 have managed to get results that perhaps they shouldn't have been getting. And I think that luck's beginning to run out for them. They've got another number 10 as well who's really talented, Florent Mollet, but I think they over-rely on him a bit sometimes, so I don't see them staying up. Above that, I mean, it could almost be the unthinkable when you see Sochaux in the position they're in. I mean, just to think they were Ligue 1 regulars a few seasons ago, and now they find themselves at the foot of Ligue 2. It's quite a sad circumstance. But I think Nîmes, with the results they've got recently, they've shown that they are capable of beating anybody on their day. They've got Koura and Mounet up front, who are both exceptional strikers, and they've got a good partnership. Obviously, Koura has been linked with a move away, and he's out injured at the moment. But they're showing that even without him, they can beat teams like Dijon. So I think they'll stay up. But it's a shame for me being a Niort fan, but I really could see Niort going down instead of Sochaux because I think Sochaux have a much stronger team than Niort. Evian, Tonon Gaillard as well. I think they've been disappointed in terms of their home form, but away from home they have got some good results. And I'd say they've got a stronger team than Niort as well. So if I was to make a prediction at the moment, I'd probably say Paris FC, Créteil, and Niort will go down.
Yeah, and it's really surprising seeing Paris FC have 17 draws all season. That tells you exactly where the problem lies, really.
Exactly. That's spot on. I mean, there was one match they played recently where they played Nancy away from home, a game that nobody gave them any chance of winning. And they had a 2-0 lead, which they chucked away after getting 2 players sent off and ended up getting beat 4-2. So, I mean, that just sums them up.
It's that kind of season. That's when you know you're going to be relegated, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about some of the talent you've already mentioned. A number of mercurial talent in the division. Who might come to Liga or European football in general next season, regardless of whether their team goes up or down?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I can't see past Ait Benacer in regards to that question. I think he's an exceptional number 6. I think playing beside a player as experienced as Benoit Pedretti has been absolutely fantastic for him. He's obviously passing some of his skill on to him. There was a match I was watching a couple of weeks ago, and he played this absolutely incredible, about 60-yard pass over the top of the opposition defence to feed in Dali up front. And you just think, that doesn't matter what league you're playing in, just to demonstrate that type of talent with as little effort as he seems to put into it is just absolutely incredible. So, I mean, he's been linked with Atletico Madrid in the past. I've seen some reports on the GFFN site saying that he's been linked with Arsenal as well. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Also, it's interesting, if you look at the bottom of the table, there's teams like Valenciennes, Sochaux, Evian, who, even though they find themselves in quite a precarious position, they're giving young players that are coming through the ranks first team football, and those players are growing as a result of that. There's a centre back at Sochaux at the minute, Jérôme Onguéné, who made his debut at the start of the season at 17, and now he's playing regularly for France under-19s, and he's an absolutely exceptional prospect at centre back. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him in England in the future, because he is basically the prototype of the perfect centre back for English football. He's tall, he's strong in the air. He's vocal when you watch matches. You can hear him organising the defence, and it's quite frightening to think that he's only 17, 18 years old. So he's definitely one to watch. Yeah. Also, if you ever get a chance to watch Evian, I'd say it's definitely worth keeping an eye on Fabien Santonze, who plays at left back for them, but he's also played at right back, centre mid, and he's played up front as well. So if you're wanting a versatile player, he's the type of player to be looking out for.
Can he play in goal as well? It sounds like the only position he's not tried yet so far.
I think they could try him there if they needed it.
So we mentioned the clubs that you think are going up. That's Dijon, Nancy, and most likely Red Star. Out of those three, who has much like Angers this season, have proved that limited funds can push you a little bit further. But it is much like the other two teams, Troyes and Gazélec, have shown it's difficult to stay in Liga. Who has the best tools at this moment in time to keep their Liga status, should they gain it next season?
It's an interesting question, because if you'd asked me at the start of the season about Liga, I'd have definitely said that Troyes would be the team to stay up. So I'm maybe not in the best position to answer that one. But personally, I think there's going to be a lot of instability at Red Star, in the fact that the Stade Valloire, the ground that's their home, isn't ready for Ligue 2 football at the moment, so it's not going to be ready for Ligue 1 either. So there's an off-field situation that they're going to have to get sorted before they can even think about matters on field. I mean, that's tough to address. But Dijon, I don't think they've got as strong a squad as Nancy by any stretch of imagination, but they've got a fantastic coach, and he's getting the best out of them this season. If he stays at the club, I personally think that Dijon could have a good go at it next season. But Nancy, we all know, are the biggest club in the league. They're a Ligue 1 club, and everything apart from the league they find themselves in at the moment. They've got a good stadium, good youth system, a really strong squad, and they have a decent coach. So I could see them doing the Angers next season.
And it'll be interesting to see, because it can be such a difficult thing to predict Ligue 2 clubs coming up, that they can go, like we mentioned, we all thought Troyes might be the more likely team to do something. We all thought Angers might be heading straight back out of the window, back out the trapdoor, but you never really know in this game called football, I don't think. You mentioned to me earlier that there's been some recent international call-ups as well. Who should we be potentially looking out for in the African Cup of Nations next winter?
Well, I keep mentioning that man again, but I mean, people in March, where we're at the start of the month, we're talking about Boufal declaring for Morocco and how that might be a blow for France. But Benacer as well, he declared for Morocco. He played at youth level, but then he chose to join Hervé Renard's side for the match against Togo and the Cape Verde Islands. So for me, he is the ultimate number 6. I think if he decides that he wants to stay as focused on his career as he's been so far, I think he could really be a great addition to the Morocco setup. As well, you might remember on Azu he's been called up to the Tunisia selection, and he's a good number 6 as well. Scored a cracking goal recently from about 30 odd yards. It was the technique, which is fantastic. But also, as mentioned, Red Star earlier, Naeem Sliti, who plays number 10 for them, he's been called up to the Tunisia team as well. He's just an old school attacking midfielder. He runs all day, but the tricks he can pull out the bag are just fantastic. And it's also great to see him performing as well as he's performing at the moment, because he's had a few setbacks in his career. He's not developed as quickly as he'd want to. He's 23 years old, but it's great to see now that he's making a name for himself in League 2. He's reaping the rewards, getting called up to the international side.
Excellent. Just very quickly, Brendan, could you repeat the name of the second player? It went a bit, the connection went a little bit strange and we missed his name.
All right, sure. Laurent Azouni.
Yeah, excellent. I just didn't want to. I wanted to note it down myself more than anything, so I didn't want to have to miss out on that. But it looks like it'll be an exciting end to the season, and with 7 games to go and plenty more Mondays for you to enjoy, but I must be looking forward to it. But we'll move on to our heroes and villains section this week. Eric, just wanted to get your opinion on that. Who's your hero and your villain this week?
Sure, I think that the hero is an obvious one, Dimitri Payet. This is someone who's been definitely away from the France squad for quite a while, but I think has been the catalyst for perhaps what would be the surprise story of the season were it not for Leicester City in the Premier League, and that's West Ham United under Slaven Bilic. I mean, he's done it all: goals, assists, free kicks, playing in a central role, playing on the left wing, and he demonstrated more of that versatility and more of that talent. Doing well to set up Martial for the assist for Matuidi's winner, striking the post himself. Just a really dynamic presence throughout the game, and I think has not only solidified his place in the squad, but also solidified his place in the starting 11. Should he continue this kind of form in the run-in, especially with West Ham pushing for the Champions League at this point in time.
What about your villain, Eric?
And my villain, I don't want to say that they're a villain, but I think that N'Golo Kante could have done a little bit better. He just seemed a little bit too overeager in his in making his France debut. Still a tremendous player. I'm not taking anything away from him, but I think that that France needs a little bit more positional discipline in that role in front of the center backs. Come the biggest competitive fixtures, and I'm not sure that Kante showed that he could be that player. He'll have more of a chance in the coming weeks and months to demonstrate that, both with his club and in the friendlies at the end of May, beginning of June. But for the moment, I don't think he did himself much of a service on his initial France appearance.
Yeah, maybe we need to see a little bit more of Kante tomorrow night, and then hopefully he'll show what he can do. Move on to our final section tonight with the Euros slowly approaching on the horizon now. I thought it would be best to chat about the players playing their trade in Ligue 1 this season that could really shine during the tournament. There's plenty to choose from. I'll start with you, Eric. Who do you think could really stick themselves in the shopping window this summer?
I think Bernardo Silva has to be the easy answer here. He was linked with Chelsea during the winter window. He struggled with injury a little bit this season, but we saw during the run-in last season for Monaco. And again, this season, some of the spotlight's been a little bit more on Thomas Lemar, but Silva's a fantastic player. He can play all across the front line, except as a true attacker. Great motor, great energy, good passer, good dribbler. I think really should be starting for Portugal at this point in time. He's going to be yet another one of a successive run of players that are probably departing from Monaco this summer, but well deserved. I mean, a lot of people sort of raised their eyebrows at the fee that was paid for him. I think he was 15.5 million euros. His loan was made permanent last January. That is January 2015, but has certainly lived up to that fee, and I wouldn't be surprised if Monaco could double or even triple that coming this summer if indeed he does have a strong European Championship.
Yeah, he's been linked with Juventus in the past, and in all honesty, much like in 2014, he might even be one of these players that is is bought even before the start of the tournament, just to make sure that they've got his signature on the books, because there might be a small bidding war if he does perform to the level we've seen him play at in the past. It could be difficult to ignore. Brendan, is there anyone you're keeping an eye on out this summer?
Well, just like Eric just mentioned, I think Monaco have always had the problem of holding on to players, and one of the players they lost last summer, Yannick Ferreira Carrasco, I absolutely love his playing style. I think he's got a fantastic left foot on him, and I think he could do a great job for Belgium at this Euros.
And I've been really impressed with him at Atletico. I was hopefully going to mention this on a virtual. I actually think he might have been the biggest loss they had in the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, they lost quite a fair amount of players, but the way he plays on the wing, and looking at the replacements, like I don't think they're bad players. I don't think Helder Costa or I know they're playing Bernardo Silva slightly further wide, but I don't think they're bad players at all. But I thought he added an extra dynamism to their wing play. And he absolutely, certainly will be someone that a lot of clubs will keep an eye on in the summer. The one I was thinking of might seem a little bit strange at the moment, but I do want you to follow on with me. I'm actually going with Kamil Grosicki. Now, there's a number of reasons behind that. That's not necessarily because of his Rennes form. He's played reasonably well for Rennes this season, although it's been relatively sporadic. He's obviously played a secondary role to the likes of Ousmane Dembele, and when Ntep's been fit, he's regularly really come off the bench, but he's scored a fair number of goals. He's a regular for Poland, and he scored a fair amount. I mean, 8 goals from 37 appearances is reasonably good for a winger, and he seems to be coming into a little bit of form and playing in a position that all they're going to do is play the ball to Robert Lewandowski, because it's the easiest advice to give anyone when you've got a striker of that quality. But when Kamil Grosicki starts racking up a couple of assists, I could quite easily see English clubs seeing that in a European Championship, in that vacuum that they can be, where there'll be 4 or 5 players, maybe even more than that get big moves or good moves that they might not have got just based off their club form. And not to sound harsh about Kamil Grosicki, I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's a fairly decent player, but he's the perfect example of a player set to possibly have a really good tournament, but get that move in the summer that might not be quite as warranted on his regular form that he would see. Is there anyone of that? Is there anyone else in Liga, Eric, that you're thinking might be put in the shop window?
Well, I think if Ben Arfa is included, I mean, there's been all sorts of rumors flying around about a potential move for him. Beyond that, though, I'm honestly, I mean, you can make a case for Rafael Guerrero at Lorient. But beyond that, there's not really a whole lot of players that'll be playing in the championship among Liga squads, unfortunately. I mean, João Moutinho will be going with Monaco, but he's not exactly a player of the likes that is going to get people all that excited. Michy Batshuayi has a chance to go with Belgium, but again, is he going to feature ahead of both Benteke and the guy at Everton?
Yeah, Lukaku. I would definitely feature in front of Benteke, I'll say that.
I mean, no. So, in terms of players who have a chance to be key players for their club, or sorry, for their country, I really think that the two you've mentioned, and I add to that Guerrero, are really pretty much about it, as far as I'm concerned. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it does seem, you look through the squad list and a lot of them there's quality players. I mean, Anthony Lopez will be hopefully probably with the Portugal squad, but he's behind the likes of Rui Patricio, who's a really solid keeper at Sporting, and then
Daniel Subasic, maybe.
Yeah, I think he finally gets his spot, because I mean he's been
Placosa retired after the World Cup, so yeah. But again, I mean we're kind of grasping at straws here.
Just a little bit, but I do want to add one player that. Sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say, I think Grosicki's a great shout. I think he's coming into the Euros at the perfect moment, because I mean he didn't have the best Euros of Poland before, and people in Poland, I was speaking to Poland fan this week, that they're not expecting that much from him. They don't watch much Liga, so they've not seen his sort of improvement in form. So I think he could creep in to this Euros and cause a few surprises.
And like I said, he seems like that archetypal player that will just have a good tournament, get a move,
Exactly.
and probably.
And he grabbed another couple of games this week, didn't he? I think he scored against Finland. So
yes, he did. Yeah, so it'd be interesting. And there's a fair number of players. I'm quite interested that Guillaume Gillet has managed to make the squad for Belgium these past couple of friendlies for his fantastic form, really, for not playing in that both defensive role and defensive midfield role. They're full of talent, and there's no denying that. But adding someone who's fairly experienced, I mean, he's even had 21 international games, having that kind of extra added quality. Whether he'll still see much game time is another question indeed. But I've been fairly impressed with him this season, and I wouldn't be entirely surprised if they do lean on him at some point. Especially, there's the likes of Vertonghen injured at the moment, Toby Alderweireld is injured at the moment, Vincent Kompany's injured at the moment. So, and even looking at the list, Ferreira Carrasco, De Bruyne, they've got a fair number of injuries, Belgium. So, having someone like him in a squad that's got experience and has proved at Nantes this season that he's a very composed player in that midfield and in that defensive diamond. He could quite easily sit in if they need him. I think if it's a very big if injuries continue as they are, that he might get a little bit of a spot. But heading back to players that in the Euros, we'll go back to the French squad, really. Brendan, is there anyone you're really excited for looking at in the French squad and who might surprise a few people?
It depends, in my opinion, on who's fit. I mean, I think Gignac, if he gets the game time, he will definitely cause surprises. But again, if you look at how strong that forward line is, whether he'll get any game time at all, that's a different matter. The thing is, the French squad at the moment is filled with so many reputable players. I don't see anybody really causing a surprise. Perhaps Pogba, he's got all the weight of the world on him. If he goes to the tournament and he plays as well as he can, maybe that'll be a surprise in itself.
That might be a good follow-up. That's a good follow-up question actually for you, Eric. Do you think if Pogba does impress, I mean, he's been linked with a move away from Juventus numerous times in the past. Do you think one good Euros where he possibly leads France to victory might finally see him move to one of the quote-unquote bigger clubs in Europe?
I mean, possibly, but frankly for me, the issue with selling Pogba is I don't necessarily see where he fits in at the likes of a Real Madrid, a Bayern Munich, Manchester City, Manchester United.
See where it fits in Man United, sorry. Anywhere he likes.
But, I mean, I think you get my point, right? We've talked about Real Madrid, or we've seen Real Madrid twice this season in the Champions League watching PSG. They seem to need more of a defensively offense-oriented midfielder. Barcelona, does he have the ability to subsume his ego and to be a part of a team? Well, maybe not. I feel like the teams around Juventus are often built around him. And I would face similar concerns with Bayern Munich. Going to England, yeah, sure. I think that Manchester United would like to have him, but I think that they need to figure out what they're doing with Wayne Rooney first. Chelsea, I don't necessarily see what his role is in a 4-2-3-1. Maybe Conte, having known the player, has a better idea of how to use him, and his arrival could potentially be a catalyst. Again, after all, it was under the Italian manager that Pogba really blossomed, but it's hard to really say. I mean, let's face it. As Juventus showed against Bayern Munich, they, for me, are one of the top 5 club teams in the world. I mean, they're probably 5th. I'll give you that, but maybe with Atletico Madrid. Is how much can Pogba really improve his situation in terms of how he fits into a club and the club's potential for success? And the question is, I don't know that he necessarily can all that much, given the way he operates on the pitch.
It is an interesting question that will again be plaguing our headlines in the summer, I'm sure. But I think money might talk in the end rather than the glory at Juventus. If one of those big teams do come in, That's all for this week's show. My thanks to Eric and to Brendan for joining us. Follow him on Twitter at @ISMeesBrendan. Thank you for everyone for listening at home. Abianto and goodbye.